Did Downtown Disney just replicate one of its mistakes from the last version of itself? Because even though the building behind me looks fantastic, it is a contradiction of everything else that we've seen Disney recently doing to the Downtown Disney Entertainment District. Either they just made a big mistake, or this entire initiative was more about making Downtown Disney upscale than changing its overall theming. Today we're going to look at the past, present, and future of Din Tai Fung. But before we can determine was this a mistake, a contradiction, or just they decided midway through to go in a different plan, let's see what was here before. Who remembers this quiet street that used to sit back here? Probably not many people, because Disney had completely routed you away from it. In 2015, Disneyland would start to use metal detectors, but that was all up at the edge of the Esplanade. However, by the end of 2016, this area would be outside of the Disney security bubble, placing Earl of Sandwich on the inside of the bubble, but pushed to the outside was a Alamo car rental, a Travelex, where you could do currency exchange for international guests, and the Walt Disney Travel Company, a place where you could book future vacations through Walt Disney. Done in the old Downtown Disney aesthetic, these businesses were pushed on the outside of the bubble, and towards the end, none of them were active. This area over here was used to blow up balloons that they would sell over in Downtown Disney. But friends, something that was announced was going to be coming to right where I'm standing. Something much, much larger was coming, and basically made Disney satisfied to kill the west end of their entertainment district. To take advantage of some major tax incentives, in 2017, Disney announced a huge hotel would be coming that would sit in all of this space. But on the day that the bulldozers were literally supposed to show up, Disney pulled the plug on the project. And it is often debated how that decision was made. The way that I heard it, Disney was going to be forced to take their cast members to a living wage to get all the incentives that they were promised, and that was enough for them to pull out. But others will tell you a different version of that story. But that meant that this area would sit as a ghost town for a long time, as Disney had no real plan on what to do with the West End, but they had already abandoned a lot of these businesses, such as the old AMC Theater. Then with the events of 2020 happening, that just put the entire park into ghost town status. At the very beginning of 2022, we would see all of this get bulldozed. And it seemed like at the moment, Disney only had a vague idea or plan for what was coming next. And in the beginning of the announcements of Downtown Disney, we were only giving one sort of very vague piece of concept art. And then slowly we would see Disney work its way around Downtown Disney, taking old tenants and trying to convert them into a new consolidated look. A new style guide was being established for the entire property. But 5 months later, Din Tai Fung would be announced. And now, over 2 years later, it is opening up. For those of you that are unaware, Din Tai Fung is an extremely popular Chinese food restaurant. It originated in Taiwan going back to 1958. I do believe that this is their first ever standalone location, at least in the US. And this is a wildly successful restaurant. It's very hard to get in, and it does skew more to the upscale end of what one would expect for a theme park dining experience. But when Disney decided to bulldoze this area, something else was happening all around Downtown Disney. All of the announcements that we would get would all push Downtown Disney in one very specific design narrative, except for one location. Which makes me wonder, how did this happen? Was this always planned? Was it just a mistake because a really premier restaurant was willing to come to Downtown Disney? I mean, this place is so popular. If you're not from Southern California or not aware of this restaurant, I cannot stress the popularity of this place. This for sure made Disney feel like everything that they had done, whether it was intentional or not, was heading in the right direction. But architecturally speaking, this did go in a different direction. I don't mean to be overly critical. I just know that when I look at all the money and time and effort that was spent to get things like the Rainforest Cafe out of here, I just wonder, did they go too far with this one? And yes, there is a huge distance between how gaudy this building and how Din Tai Fung looks slightly different than everything else. But they're not even done with all of the construction. And when I started to see this building go in, my initial reaction was, man, that looks really good. Man, that doesn't look like anything else. I thought that was one of the problems that this version of Downtown Disney was supposed to fix, not create more problems. It is very interesting, Downtown Disney, how all the pieces have moved around over the years. I'm kind of fascinated by it because it is such a small, delicate piece of land, and I kind of feel like Disney has never really had a fleshed out master plan, and they've always just every 10 years kind of reacted and made up a new game plan and then shifted a decade later. Back before all this plan came together, we saw Naples get a transformation from its cartoony pizzeria version of itself to a more sleek and elegant upscale modern approach. The Black Tap Lucky Strike area of Downtown Disney would also get converted over where it could to a more modern California, mid-century modern Palm Springs aesthetic. I mean, after all, I did completely defend Ralph Brennan's Jazz Kitchen getting transformed over into a modern look because I thought that's what we were going for here. Not a roadside attraction where every building looks like a cartoon version of what it's supposed to symbolize. And then we look at just the completely abandoned Tortilla Joe's, where it's just sitting here collecting dust until a steakhouse shows up. But how much massaging are they going to have to do to the exterior of this building to make it look like a steakhouse and not look like the cartoon or comical Tortilla Joe's, where it has all of its flowing architectural notes outside, a various palette of colors? I believe this whole building was designed in sort of a cartoonish way to be like taqueria, Mexican food, versus upscale or sophisticated Mexican food, like what we see further down Downtown Disney, where there was the transformation for Paseo and Citrico. That feels upscale and feels like it's culturally representative, which is exactly what Din Tai Fung is doing. It's adding in modern architecture, but also letting you know what the culture of the business is. However, the items down the street at Citrico, a couple of decorations get removed, and that could be whatever it needs to be if that idea doesn't work. But Din Tai Fung, it's pretty locked in to what it is. Now I have to question, did Ralph Brennan's Jazz Kitchen have to transform? I mean, I do like this version aesthetically much better, but for everybody who loved that it looked like a little slice of New Orleans, I kind of feel like maybe you were robbed. Or at least could Disney have fought harder to put a modern New Orleans aesthetic together? Because what we have behind us feels entry-level modern, and it feels no-level New Orleans, other than the words jazz and a silhouette of a saxophone here or there. So when I do these design critiques, I do try to be fair. And I'm trying to stress, I'm never going to just go along with Disney or political correctness because I feel like I have to. All these opinions are always mine, and sometimes two opinions maybe don't make sense, but that's what a personality is called. I want to go on record as saying I do believe that this building is beautiful. I think it's aesthetically a wonderful addition to Downtown Disney, but as a designer and as somebody who in my professional career has to follow style guides, making sure that every bit of a project locks thematically into all the other projects around it, I feel like if I turned this in to match everything else that we had just been working on, this would probably get kicked back 9 times out of 10. And the design style for Din Tai Fung obviously skews over to a Chinese architecture style. I believe this is what they refer to as the imperial influence design, but here we see it in more of a Gensler architectural style. And if you don't know, Gensler is a huge architectural company that many Imagineers have gone over to work for, and even some Gensler employees have come over to Imagineering. Gensler seems to be somewhat of a training ground or a graduating area for Disney Imagineers. I'm not sure what they pay, but they seem happy to go there in the twilight years of their career. We see the building with its over-exaggerated gables and eaves. Red lanterns and bamboo create harmony between the modern aesthetics and a cultural heritage. It is all glass on the two sides that face the downtown Disney Plaza, allowing lots of natural light, but also allowing guests to see all the different events and entertainment that is happening inside of the park. And as most Chinese buildings you will see, it has a strong focus on horizontal length, and a lot of the decorative elements are put up on its roof. And it has very subtle vertical details, allowing the roof to really shine as a symbol of design and heritage. The interior of the restaurant is definitely equipped to handle this particular tenant, which is kind of where some of my fears lie, because I thought that this was what downtown Disney was trying to get away from, but now they have fully embraced the old mindset of downtown Disney for this particular high-end tenant. And keeping it honest, one major critique I do have of this building, for those of you that are unaware, in Southern California and going into Nevada, it is kind of required that a lot of your HVAC systems go up on top of your roof because of the amount of dust and dirt and debris that blows around out here due to an overall lack of rain. And on the top of this building, they really went out of their way to make a decorative Chinese influenced roof. But the HVAC system in the crow's nest is way too visible. I think they need to have more of those horizontal wood slats in there to better disguise this. But maybe that's the limit on how many slats they can put in there for proper ventilation for the HVAC system. But I do find this crow's nest to be a bit of an eyesore, and I would maybe recommend doing some sort of design elements around it to maybe disguise it or to make it look more decorative. But when I look at the building, it's kind of hard for me not to see just all the junk that's not well hid on top of it. And as much as I think they did a great job of making cultural meet design aesthetic, I do wonder what happens when Din Tai Fung says we don't want to be in downtown Disney anymore. What do you do with this structure after they vacate it? I feel like that is the 10, 15 year, 20 year, or 5 year. I mean, who knows? Not all restaurants work. Not all lessees like the agreements that they have with a place like downtown Disney, which, by the way, not only do you pay rent here, but you also pay a percentage of sales. Who knows if that's the way that Din Tai Fung is going to like things to operate after 5, 6 years, especially with none of us knowing what the economy or what sort of worldly events are on the horizon. Everything's fine now, the money's flowing, but as adults, we've all seen time and time when that wasn't the case. And I do understand that when Din Tai Fung was ready to come to downtown Disney, the executives probably like, yo, we've hit a home run. And they have hit a home run. That place is going to be wildly popular for years and years to come. But you never know the future, and they have locked themselves into a building that will probably be here for a long point of the future. And why this is even crazier is where the Din Tai Fung building sits, right? The one building now that's kind of the outlier of the overall aesthetic. That building is sitting exactly in a spot that is going to be so important when Disney figures out, do we add a third gate? Or do we extend DCA and Disneyland across Disneyland Drive? And that building being exactly where it's at might be one of the things that prohibit all of this to be a third gate, because that building creates a pinch point. So a very popular restaurant is definitely worth a bend in the road. But what happens when they leave and they have erected 2 theme parks exactly around that building, and then Din Tai Fung no longer wants that building? That's just my theory on why possibly this might be a mistake. And to put anything there was a huge gamble for all their future plans. But then again, everything on the western end feels kind of like Disney's been making it up as they've been going along. So who knows? When that was drafted, were they even thinking about Disneyland Forward? Or was that an advantageous move when the city of Anaheim realized exactly how much they need Disneyland during COVID-19 when the parks were closed for 440 days, bringing Anaheim to financial crisis. So with it seeming like that there is no massive long-term plan, I look at each piece as, well, what will happen when they change their mind the next time? And the Din Tai Fung restaurant definitely does lock Disney in to there's an expectation now of a very specific type of business that you would expect to be inside of that building. And I feel like that is going to be something that could potentially come back to haunt them. Or who knows, maybe Din Tai Fung is the perfect business partner. They stay there forever and everybody stays excited forever to have that delicious food on the edge of downtown Disney. But if it doesn't go that way, then I've got a strong point. And I guess even though I'm excited to try the food and to have this be a part of my Disneyland lifestyle, I am worried. Is this going to be a decade or so from now, the next Rainforest Cafe and ESPN Zone and Tortilla Joe's that Disneyland has to figure out how to crowbar into their storytelling narrative because a leasee went away, leaving behind a building that was uniquely designed for them. But really, everything around me is in flux, and I want you to watch this video right here that shows how this space behind me could be the entryway to the third gate that's coming to the Disneyland Resort.